Welcome everybody to this workshop in which we're going to hear from some of the world's experts in the various fields of community-oriented integrated practice. So the format is speaker for 5 minutes, 15 minutes on the table when you debate the issues, 15-minute feedback and discuss with them, and I'm sure you're going to have the most wonderful time.
There are 4 key principles that define a community health and wellbeing worker if you're not aware of them. The first is that they're comprehensive. That's to say that they are agnostic with respect to any particular clinical condition or age group or demographic group or anything like that. They just want to solve the problems that any given household has, whether across health and or social care. So that can be breastfeeding support, smoking cessation, housing issues, mould, domestic violence, whatever it might be that household is concerned with. Community health workers go there and find out what the problems are. The second principle is they are hyper-local. That's to say they are recruited from the community. They don't have any particular qualification or professional background. They don't have to be health related, but they live and work therefore in the neighbourhood where they are then deployed. Okay, they are paid full time as well. The third principle is they're universal. That's to say, in the small neighbourhoods where they are deployed of around 120 households each, they visit every single household each month at least once. And the fourth and final really important dimension is that they're integrated into the statutory services. And that actually is important to really comprehend. They can refer to GPs, they can refer to the police, they can refer to the fire brigade, they can refer to social care, they can refer to housing departments and the local authority, and vice versa. That integration is absolutely fundamental. So how do we locate this particular role? In which organisation, in which sector? And the inability to locate them in those sectors actually makes it really challenging to identify how to regulate them, how to train them, how to evaluate them. The risk, therefore, is that they become overly bureaucratised. They become overly regulated. We might call it, without any disrespect, NHS-ified. Yeah? We need to figure out a way to actually support them, train them, and evaluate them without destroying the essence of that role. Fabulous. Is that enough time?
Thank you, yes. So you've got 10 or so minutes to debate the education implications of the community health and wellbeing workers.
But I had trouble with what he said about the NHS-ifying, because it seems to me that we don't make a success of this unless we recruit the NHS to the ideas of it.
There's just something powerful of these workers actually have the lived experience of what it's like to be living in these council estates.
When I originally trained as a health visitor, there are about 80% of what Matt said. That's what we were doing.
They seem to be complementary and beneficial to the public, or they seem to be sort of substituting for GPs or whatever it might be.
In a sense, it's how do you get into people when they're still in training to see this role, person in this kind of role, as somebody they would work with rather than tell them what to do or ignore.
Okay, everybody. Actually, any table particularly wants to come up quickly and start this off. Claire.
We talked about actually not imposing what the community needs in their health working. It's allowing the community to identify who they would have as their advocate or their healthcare representative and what their priorities were.
Another table, please.
Don't we want the culture of the NHS to be complementary? Do we not want to see the values that the community health and wellbeing workers are embodying to become those of at least the generalists within the NHS?
How do you change here businesses? I mean, to me as a business, for example, all of us GPs sitting here, what the benefit to me? Unless you answer that question, all this is nice theories.
What's important isn't necessarily what can be measured, it's what cannot be measured is what's important. The impact on people's lives, the conversations, the trust that's been built over time. We only really talk about what we can gather data on, but oftentimes in this work, you can't gather data on it, but it doesn't make it less important. And we always think about transaction, not relation. And that's really what is going to lead to the necessary change in the NHS, is relational change over time. So I think our educational ambition is probably not to educate the community health workers anymore, it's to have them educate us.
When we actually wrote the document of primary care now more than ever in 2008, which is a major report for WHO, we talked about primary care which is community-based. Most of the health systems around the world is about urgent care and emergency. They don't care. There is no space to look at the health of people. Unfortunately, a few months ago, I don't know whether you've seen this paper. In it, they suggest that GPs should never deal with the community, prevention things in the community. They should focus on the medical things only.
On that very challenging thought, you've got 10 minutes to come up with some challenging suggestions about the implications of what Salman is saying.
One of the commonly cited phrases or numbers in the U.S. is, okay, if you're after an outcome and there's multiple inputs, and the formal healthcare system is only about 20% of the outcome of health. 40% is of sort of social determinants, and 40% is genetic. It's this notion of all of these other inputs that are frankly more important than the formal healthcare delivery system.
Yeah, I know most of my medical friends would say I'm talking bollocks, but isn't there a measurement of happiness? We don't value that. We just value, like, is your blood pressure under control?
This is really important. We need to shift into
prevention.
But Salman, what is the solution?
This is the investment. Put your wallet on the table.
When you talk about prevention, for us, since only 20% of health is related to health care, what about the other 80%? I'm a practicing GP, so your whole mindset becomes taken over by risk factors. So we become immune to being able to respond to suffering. It's all about data, blood pressure, smears, immunizations, all of this stuff. It's not that I disagree with it, I'm just saying it takes up an awful lot of headspace. There's kind of unforeseen consequences, I think.
So I was the co-chair of the Lancet Commission on the Value of Death, and our sort of starting point was that we have an unhealthy relationship with death. Dying is healthy, not dying would not be healthy. We thought that death was much too medicalised. There's a tendency among healthcare professionals to see death as the enemy rather than as a friend. There's too much over-treatment. It's seen as a kind of medical problem rather than a family, a community, a relational, a spiritual phenomenon. We have a paradox in the world insofar as there are a group of people who are being horribly over-treated at the end of life, while there are literally billions of people who cannot get access to even the most basic palliative care. So what we would like to see is a rebalancing of death and end-of-life care, bringing death back into life, moving it from it happening in hospitals and looked over by doctors and nurses and health professionals to much more of a community-based enterprise. Having said that, I can't honestly say that we really understand how exactly to change systems. That's something we need to think much more about, and I hope perhaps you can help me.
Two things. We need to be able to talk about death. We need to make it less taboo, that it is something you talk about, and that hands up anybody that's got a living will. Exactly. So you need to have a living will that your family are aware of.
Normalize it more, maybe even in TV shows or things, the idea of death cafes and grief cafes, where in addition to death, it's also the aftercare for the families.
We talked about hospitals as institutions to take away suffering and death away from our sight as a society, and going back to an earlier conversation about the importance of hospitals as an institution to hide away death.
David, one of the Davids?
I do think we need to start, we've talked about birth control, and that was one time a taboo. We've got to start talking about death control, I think. And natural childbirth, natural death. How do we help people die with dignity
and to ease themselves into what's a natural state. I mean, I want that.
As an individual, when you die, you're not economically viable, you're not productive, etc. And I think there is something about that as well. It's how do we make money out of you? You know, it's not good if you're dying, is it? So we're going to put you in a care home. So that's the other aspect.
I want to thank you all for being here.